We're going to go over to Sanpete County where Commissioner Jarrett has a question about agriculture, immigration, and environment. Commissioner
Hello.
Jarrett, you're on the line with Senator Lee.
Hello, Commissioner.
Hello, Senator. How are you?
Doing great, thank you.
Good. Well, we had 1.5 inches of snow, and the current temperature is 23 degrees. So hopefully you're a little warmer there than we are here.
Not much, Commissioner. In fact, it's also very cold here, and it's snowing. And the thing about Washington, D.C. is that they're not very good at handling snow, not nearly like they are in Utah.
Well, Senator, as you know, when you visited Sanpete County, you referred to it relative to our cooking industry. We are a predominantly agriculture county. And as such, I am becoming increasingly concerned with regulations. Regulations on air quality, water quality, waters of the U.S. definition. It just seems like all of these regulations seem to be coming down and have no oversight relative to Congress. I think it's something that needs to be looked at very carefully. I think they need to be reined in. I think the domino effect of what they have and do to our industries here in Sanpete County should be taken into consideration, and particularly on agriculture. I also, and tied with that is, I would like to know what your status is on and your interest is in immigration, seeing that somehow get some resolution, as that has a dramatic impact on my county as well. And lastly, if you would, address mining. Again, that's one of those areas, again, where regulators seem to be coming in and imposing a bunch of regulations. There seems to be also an attack on coal. You know, instead of shutting down an industry that provides lots of employment, is the backbone of the energy source for our country, shouldn't we be focusing money on technology for the use of coal to still continue as an energy source? So, there you go, Senator.
Great. Well, thank you, Commissioner. First of all, I want to express to all my friends in Sanpete County that there's no one in our state who cares more about her community and about her country than Commissioner Claudia Jarrett. And so, Commissioner, I'm honored to have you on the call and happy to address each of your questions. Let's take each of them in turn. As to the first question with regard to regulations, yes, this is a big problem. It's a problem that I discuss extensively in a book I wrote a few months ago, in which I explain that there's a big problem in Congress, a problem that has evolved over the course of many decades, a problem that relates to the fact that Congress these days, instead of passing real laws, instead passes what passes for a law, but is in reality a statement of almost abstract principles. For example, when Congress wants to solve a particular problem, it'll pass a law that might say, for instance, we shall have clean air. Now that's fine as far as it goes. Everyone's for clean air. We all want cleaner air, especially those of us who live in a state where fog inversions are common and where smog gets trapped, particularly in nasty winter months. And so it's a problem. But the problem with this type of legislating is that when Congress doesn't define what clean air is, when Congress doesn't define with adequate specificity what pollution is, when Congress doesn't adequately define what the penalties for certain conduct will be, problems happen. And what Congress ends up doing is it ends up saying, we shall have clean air, and we hereby delegate to the EPA the power to define clean air, the power to define pollution, the power to decide what kinds of limits on the emission of air pollution will exist, and then also the power to enforce those same rules that carry the force of law. This is a problem, you see, because when members of Congress pass bad laws, you can remove them. You can vote them out of office. You have the power to vote out senators every 6 years and representatives every 2 years. You can't do that with government bureaucrats. Our bureaucracies in Washington, D.C., the people who write and enforce the regulations that you describe, are run by men and women who, while well-educated, hardworking, well-intentioned in every respect, they don't work for you. You can't fire them. They don't respond to you because they don't ever stand for election. And that's why when people complain about overregulation, and you'd be surprised at how often this issue comes up. It comes up at every single town hall I have, and with good reason. These regulations that you described cost the American economy $2 trillion every single year. By the way, we get every year 80,000 pages of new regulations from the federal government. These costs are enormous, and they're not borne simply by America's wealthy or by big, nameless, faceless corporations. This $2 trillion in regulatory compliance costs, which, by the way, comes close to what we collect through our income tax system, is really borne ultimately by America's poor and middle class. You see, every single American out there, especially the poor and middle class, pay more for everything they buy, goods and services alike, as a result of these regulatory costs. It's a complicated problem because of the fact that this is so entrenched now. This is part of the way Washington does business. There's just this well-worn understanding that Congress will pass these broad, vague laws, and Congress doesn't want to hold itself accountable, and it outsources the real task of lawmaking to somebody else. As complicated as the problem is, and as long-standing as it may be, there is, fortunately, Commissioner, a very simple solution. And I'm pleased to report that I'm a co-sponsor, an original co-sponsor of the solution. It's called the REINS Act, R-E-I-N-S. It stands for Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny. Here's what the REINS Act says. It says that for every new major rule, meaning a rule that would have a significant economic impact on the country, as opposed to something that, for instance, just governs what time the lights go on and off in the Department of Commerce every night. For that kind of regulation, one that would have a significant impact on the American economy, any new regulation would not take effect unless or until both houses of Congress had enacted that regulation into law, and the law had been signed by the President. See, this is how it's supposed to operate. My copy of the Constitution, in the very first clause of the first section of the first article, says that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Legislative powers are the powers to make law, and so to make a law, including a law of the sort that you see EPA and other federal agencies making routinely, you should have to go through Congress every single time. Now, the REINS Act has passed the House of Representatives each year, every year for the last 3 or 4 years in a row. Tragically, inexcusably, we have yet to get a vote, an up or down vote on this in the Senate. I'm going to continue to fight for that. It's one of the most important measures we could have, and this would do more to reinvigorate the American economy and to free the American people from the oppressive yoke and burden of the omnipresent, overbearing administrative regulatory state than just about anything I can think of.